All right, let's go over this unit 1, day 13. So I shortened the assignment in class, and I'm just having you do numbers 1 through 3 because that's going to take you through one problem with the three different methods. And then numbers 5 through 7, practice kind of coming up with some designs, and then just number 11 because that talks about the statistical significance. So here we have number 1, completely randomized. So that's the key to this problem about the SAT. They're wanting to know if the two treatments, which are the SAT class online versus SAT class in the classroom, and how that affects the SAT score. So first, you are asked specifically to do this completely randomized. This happened several years ago on the AP test where students were asked to do a completely randomized experiment, and yet they kind of started doing blocked design. And then in part B of the problem, it led them to this idea of blocking. And so students kind of had to go back up and revamp and go do the completely randomized. So be mindful if you're told which type of design to do. So here we go. So our completely randomized is just our SRAP Me Capped. So we're going to start with the 50 student volunteers. And so we're going to randomly assign them with a big bag. So we're going to randomly assign them to a treatment by, here comes the asterisk, putting them in a big bag, shaking well, and pulling out students or 25 students for the online SAT prep and 25 students for the classroom SAT prep course. Make sure you're saying putting them in a big bag, shaking well, and pulling out. Don't just say, I'm going to randomly assign them with the big bag method to these things. Okay, that's not adequate. Measure each student's SAT score after finishing the prep course, and then compare the average SAT score of the online SAT prep students to that of the classroom SAT prep course students to see if there is significant difference between the SAT scores on average of the two types. So then here, the counselors are afraid that students being a senior versus a junior is going to confound the problem. What happens if you ended up with a lot of seniors in one of those groups? Then, is it because it's a classroom SAT prep, or is it because they were mostly seniors? So we want to control that with blocking. So we're going to start this off by saying block the 50 AHS volunteer students by grade classification, junior or senior. Specifically state how you're blocking them. Don't just say block by grade classification, junior or senior, because the AHS counselor sync the grade classification. Don't say affects the response, or don't say because we think that the grade classification affects the SAT score generally obtained by AHS students. So now, then we're going to SRAP Me Capped in one of those blocks. So we're going to start with the 20 volunteers. I guess it told us that. Did it say a certain number? Oh, maybe we knew up here. Yeah, 20 seniors and 30 juniors. Okay, so we were told how many. So start with the 20 AHS volunteers who are seniors, and then we're going to SRAP. So within that block, we're going to continue the RAP Me Capped as in problem number 1. So once we're done with that, then once the experiment is completed with the seniors block, complete the same experiment above with the AHS volunteers who are juniors. So once you complete it with one block, then say you're going to finish it with the other. All right, and finally, we have this situation where there are many student qualities that play into SAT success. So they want to reduce the confounding effects of many traits, which you probably can imagine affect the SAT success. So how could you do this? So I did matched pairs then. So I said, make matched pairs by finding a pair of students who are most closely matched by and then you can come up with whatever you think is reasonable, their grade, so junior, senior, their GPA, maybe how many AP classes they take, because I would imagine that affects it, and so on, maybe past indicators of how they've done on their past uh, standardized tests, because it is suspected that these many traits have an impact on the SAT score generally of that type of student. Okay, start with the 25 matched pairs. Put each pair in its own bag. Now, I wanted to point out to you that the reason I did not do a crossover is because that would have them do the, say you randomly assigned them to do the classroom first and then the online, and then the other ones do the online and then the classroom. If they're doing both methods, and that's kind of tainting the results of whatever is second. Because if in the second group, it's whatever second is always going to seem to be better, because you're going to have more practice. You're going to have now multiple, um, prep courses that you've gone through. So that's why I felt it needed to be twins, so that we're just comparing this student's results to this student's results. So we're going to put each of the pair in its own bag, shake well, randomly assign one twin to the online SAT score and one to the classroom one. So that's my SRAT. Measure each student's SAT score and find the difference between those twins, and compare the average difference to between the two groups to see if there's a significant difference in the online classroom SAT prep. Okay, so that was 1 through 3. Now we're going to go on to 5, 6, and 7. So those didn't necessarily have you do the whole thing. They just asked you, how would you design, or what kind of design would you use, and how is the randomness used in that experiment. So for both numbers 5 and 6, in order to accomplish this experiment, because they are comparing in number 5, one type of bacon, Oscar Mayer bacon, to Hormel bacon. Well, in order for somebody to decide which tastes better, which is right here, in order for me to decide which tastes better, I need to have sampled both. So by virtue of that, it naturally has to be a crossover design. So this has got to be matched pairs crossover, because I have to do both to be able to say which one is better. But the randomness occurs, as you can see there. It occurs in randomly assigning half the subjects to do Oscar Mayer first and then Hormel, and then the other half will go Hormel bacon and then Oscar Mayer. So it happens in the order, so that, say, if you have, it's like the old toothpaste and orange juice thing. So the order isn't affecting how well the other tastes. So that happened with this number 6 as well. Do people appreciate the difference between sound of $100 speaker and 1,000? Choose an experimental design. So they would have to be trying both of them to compare them to see if there is a significant difference between them. So again, the matched pairs crossover with randomness going to which type of speaker the subject heard first. All right, now with this number 7, there's a situation where, could you match pair? Yes. There's everything you can match pair, and match pair is just a more specific way of blocking. But if you listen to the language in this problem, it was gearing you down the path that there's really only one major component that is affecting how these tires are washed. And that's, of course, the size of the tires. And that would be affected by the type of vehicle. So these bigger vehicles have these bigger tires. So the SUVs and trucks. So I just blocked by SUVs and trucks. So they were just comparing themselves together. And then you would randomly assign them to the two different processes. Okay. And then over here was the other regular sized cars. And then you're going to randomly assign them to the two different processes. Okay. And then our last problem, number 11, statistically significant happens if your results are so far away from what you expect to happen that that has to be attributed to the sample or to the treatment and not just happening because of sampling variability, just because you happen to get different kinds of students and such than me. So there's that one. All right. So I hope that that helps you understand those components of your Unit 1, Day 13 assignment.